We've all been there. We've sent out a quick text out into the world and then realized, ooh, that could be read completely different to how I intended.
No, not that kind of over.
And this crazy misinterpretation can be due to three main elements, which is the physical text, the author's and the reader's own bias, and the current circumstance, cultural and historical context that those readers and authors carry with them. If we go back to poor Spidey, we see that he didn't preface the "it's over" with further details. MJ quickly associated with her text about their relationship, and not being ready to talk. So drawing meaning from the text has MJ believing she's being dumped. But she has also brought her own bias to the conversation and solely reads the text as only relating to their relationship, unaware of Spidey's current situation. Which actually leads to the next note. Spidey's immediate situation, his current circumstance, was applied to the text as the author, but his physical "okay, it's over, BT dubs" doesn't reveal any of this. His intentions are lost. In the words of Roland Barthes, it's the death of the author.
The death of the author is basically any intentions that the author put into their story or any form of text is actually gone, and any interpretation is left up to the reader. However, the reader will always bring their own interpretation to the text because their bias, current circumstance, culture, and history will most definitely be different to the author's.
Remember studying Shakespeare in high school? Well, there is actually no way to definitively say that what we studied is what good old Will even intended. What a waste of English! I'm just kidding. We can get close with researching his circumstance, culture, and history, but until we actually ask him ourselves, we could be dead wrong.
Let's have a look at Snow White, one of the most traditional fairy tales that everyone knows, even if it didn't originally have the poison apple.
To summarize the physical text, the evil queen and stepmom is jealous of Snow White's beauty. She leaves the girl stranded in the forest. Snow then stumbles upon the dwarves' cottage, who agree to hide her if she becomes a housekeeper of sorts, and doesn't answer the door to strangers, until the evil queen tricks Snow and tightens the girl's corset so tight that she collapses like she was dead. Snow is then only rescued by the return of her father and his doctors. There are two major modern readings that I have pulled from this story, which actually contradict each other. The first being, with the traditional understanding of a woman's frailty, the queen is left to solely admire her beauty, which is all she's valued for, thus leading her to remove anyone who might take that away from her. In an attempt to eliminate her competition, we learn that in only valuing a woman's beauty, Snow is left defenseless and unable to find her way home from the forest due to a lack of education. The lesson of which becomes how only valuing a woman as something pretty leads to destruction, child abuse, and a lack of education. But, like I said, there is actually another reading that contradicts this. With the traditional understanding of a woman's frailty, we find ourselves in a story that a woman must use her instincts. Although valued only as a pretty thing throughout her life as royalty, Snow is willing to push through adverse situations and hardships until she finds a safe haven, which she doesn't take for granted, doesn't demand elevation due to her stature or beauty, but aims to apply herself in repaying the dwarves' kindness. The lesson of which becomes how any woman is more than beauty and is someone possible of great instincts and determination.
Do you see how the first is more about the damsel in distress and the second is more about this independent kick-ass woman? And yet they're pulled from the same story. Both of these examples came from my own bias, my own current circumstance and culture and history. But what about the author's intention?
Fairy tales are an interesting lot. Stories originally told orally and seen as warnings for little village children. The only reason why we actually have these stories is because brothers Willem and Jacob Grimm collected and compiled Germany's folklore and turned them into a written work titled Kinder- und Hausmärchen, translated as Children's and Household Tales. I have never studied German, and I apologize for any mispronunciations. After various studies and hardships, they actually broke new ground in German literature study, which was a very new field of study at their university.
But these two weren't the original authors. These stories were already flooded in German folklore, and the brothers would actually change the stories in every new edition depending on what versions were sent to them.
If we compare two variations of their Snow White, we see in one version she's left in the forest, as we read before, or a huntsman is hired to kill her. But if we were to reach back into the history of this story, we find accounts that this could be based on two different true stories, but also it could be connected to the Greek mythology that surrounds Shion. Again, pronunciation, I'm so sorry. A name which also means snow, and a story that varies just as much as Snow White's.
What?
Studying the history of Germany could also bring us closer to understanding the original author's intentions, but even then, how do we know the author was German? With folklore being passed on through word of mouth, there's no way to really find out who the original author was. So not only is the author physically dead, his intentions and reasoning behind the story is gone as well. Was it to warn children? Denounce vanity? Or was it simply entertainment for one's children? Whatever the reason, we know that when we read a text, we're applying our own contexts. Because the author's dead. Spidey's dead. Even I'm dead. Albeit figuratively. This video is up for your interpretation. Whatever my intentions are will most probably be lost amongst another's bias. So what am I getting at? Well, in the age of written digital communication, this has a higher chance of occurring. It's something we need to be aware of, whether we're the author or the reader. The intention behind someone's tweet, post, or text won't always mean what we think it does at first glance.
So be careful when you read things, because you never know who you might be killing. Thank you so much for watching, guys. This has been another video essay, and I'm trying to change up the visuals a little bit. There are actually a few more layers to this theory that it just is a little bit beyond me, so I tried to just scratch the surface level here. If you have any thoughts on the death of the author, pop them in the comments below. I would love to discuss this with you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but as always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Brittany, and you have been watching Brit Girl.